Michael Saylor is a genius, but not for the reasons you think. In today's video, we're going to talk about why everyone's favorite Bitcoin maxi, Michael Saylor, actually isn't nearly the kind of maxi that you think he is. In fact, his whole business strategy is totally counterintuitive to what most people in Bitcoin actually think it is, right? Michael Saylor is not in the business of being a Bitcoin maxi. He is in the business of selling his own versions of altcoins, right? And I'm not saying this in a mocking manner. I'm saying this, today's presentation is about changing your perspective when it comes to understanding MicroStrategy. I think MicroStrategy stock is going to soar. I think it's going to explode. And then I think it is going to crash. Let me explain why. So a lot of people have been talking recently about, oh, Michael Saylor has this and that and the other, right? You have the high leverage plays like MSTX and MSTU. Now you have Strike, now you have Stripe, now you have other things, right? Lots of new kinds of securities are being offered by Michael Saylor. And in my opinion, Michael Saylor is the most consequential and important Bitcoiner in the network today because there's nobody else accelerating adoption to the same kind of degree Saylor is, right? Obviously, you could say Trump is important. Obviously, Adam Back is pretty important, right? Obviously, every single one of us is important, including you, by the way. But as far as being consequential, I think it's very hard pressed to argue anybody but Saylor is the most important. Now, here's why. Let me explain why. Okay, like I said before, Saylor is a maxi. He is a Bitcoin maxi, obviously. However, he's going to build literally dozens of different kinds of altcoins, okay? And these altcoins are literally going to be worth trillions of dollars, okay? People right now are confused about all these new different kinds of securities that are being offered, right? Obviously, you have MicroStrategy, now rebranded as Strategy, the main equity, right? But you have all different kinds of yield products, income products, and leverage plays on the underlying equity, of course, as well as the convertible bonds that have been gobbled up by the market over the course of the last 5 years, right? And so a lot of people haven't been understanding what's going on here, right? They see, oh, wow, Michael Saylor is raising another billion here, another 10 billion there, another 500 million there. Yeah, but that security is going to be diluted. Oh, Michael's hitting the at the money too hard. Oh, it's just going to be diluted, blah, blah, blah. But they're missing the point. The whole point is the dilution, right? Why on earth would I buy an altcoin that gives me a hope of outperforming Bitcoin when I could just buy MicroStrategy? Ethereum is getting clobbered. Solana is getting clobbered. Okay, Binance Coin is getting clobbered. Dogecoin is falling apart, even though you have the world's richest man and the world's most powerful government with one of the world's most powerful pieces of branding right now. Literally, Doge is plastered on every media news outlet every single night. Dogecoin, in light of that, in my opinion, is collapsing and dramatically suffering, right? And so the point I've been saying here is that we have less in common with the near future than the past. I've been saying this for years. And the same thing is true with Bitcoin. In the very early days of Bitcoin, you had all these kinds of unregistered securities, Ethereum, Solana, whatever. You had all those things that weren't trying to be Bitcoin because every single time something tried to be Bitcoin, it would collapse because it just couldn't compete. And so the best thing it can do was to be XRP or to be whatever stupid coin and pretend to have some sort of utility or some sort of company or some sort of economic value out there, right? Some sort of unregistered security, right? Oh, we'll give you yield, right? You put Bitcoin with us in our token, we'll give you some fixed yield, right? Then it works so well for Terra Luna, right? Or other coins are going to try to get alpha on your Bitcoin, right? And my point is, we have less in common with the future in the past. The securities in crypto, the securities in Bitcoin are going to be registered securities, actually from real companies, and not these kinds of digital code just thrown out there into ether, right? And so my point is, 5 years ago, to a lot of people, it made sense. Well, oh, I'll just buy Ethereum and it'll outperform Bitcoin on the way up. And then I'll just sell the cash on the way on the bottom, right? To give the infamous quote of Raoul Pal, right? Well, then why would I ever own Bitcoin, right? Ethereum or cash, why would I ever own underlying Bitcoin, right? But that's just not true anymore. I would argue it wasn't even really true then, but it's definitely not true now. Ethereum is getting clobbered. These other altcoins are getting clobbered. Why? Because why would I buy some digital token with no company behind it and no Bitcoin treasury behind it when I could just buy the underlying equity of MicroStrategy, now known as Strategy? Because the probability of strategy doubling against Bitcoin is a way higher probability than any given meme coin doubling against Bitcoin, right? And maybe you disagree, but Wall Street agrees with what I'm saying. And that's why they're putting their money where their mouth is. And that's why you're going to see MicroStrategy continue to outperform Bitcoin and not these all kinds of unregistered securities, right? Likewise, why would I buy wrapped Bitcoin when I could buy an ETF. Yeah, sure, you can argue there's nuances. I'm definitely skipping over nuances. But for the 90% of investors out there that don't care about the tech, they're just trying to do something. Well, if they don't want to deal with self-custody, why would they deal with wrapped Bitcoin when they could just buy the ETF? ETF is basically repackaged Bitcoin, except at a lot lower risk or a lot lower perceived risk than wrapped Bitcoin, right? Likewise, if you want to buy a meme coin because you're thinking, oh man, this is going to be great. Bitcoin's going to double and triple and quadruple. Yes. And my meme coin is going to go up by a factor of 10. Yes. Awesome. It's not so awesome when you realize, well, the odds of some sort of daily 2x leverage derivative of MicroStrategy is much more probable to 10x than the meme coins, right? And this is not an encouragement you buy these option products, by the way, right? These are very high risky things. But the point is, even these 2x daily leverage long ETFs of MicroStrategy, which is basically leverage long of Bitcoin, even that is a more probable 10x than your stupid little small cap meme token, right? And so my point is, we've less common in the future than the past. The majority of crypto securities are in front of us, not behind us, right? People are looking at Bitcoin and they're looking at Ethereum and they're saying, oh, well, Ethereum is collapsing. Solana's collapsing. The altcoins are dead. In this whole video, I'm making the pitch to you that no, the altcoins are not dead. The altcoins, in fact, are just beginning. And this man, Michael Saylor, is going to be the guy to issue them. And that is not a bad thing for Bitcoin. I'll get to that more in just a moment here, right? And so likewise, why, as an investor, would I buy a yield token, right? Oh, just put your Bitcoin on our little platform and we'll give you 8% annual yield paid out on our little local tokens, right? That didn't work so well for most of the people that did that, right? They were giving up, accepting counterparty risk, and the risk was not worth it, right? And so why would you go back to that when instead you can have 10% or potentially even higher yields from different kinds of securities actually offered by the world's largest Bitcoin treasury, which is Michael Saylor's treasury, right? All of these securities that Michael Saylor's issuing, and again, this is not stopping. This is only going to accelerate. Right? A lot of people have been saying, oh, Michael is offering these kind of yield products. It's getting more and more desperate, blah, 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 whatever. It's like, no, we're not ending. We're only starting, okay? Michael is only going to offer more and more of these securities, and he's going to offer larger and larger volumes of these securities. He's not slowing down. He's starting, right? All of these securities are altcoins. They are not Bitcoin, okay? MSTX is not Bitcoin. MSTU is not Bitcoin. Bitcoin ETF, IBIT is not Bitcoin, right? STRK, STRF, all these different kinds of securities, Michael Saylor or BlackRock or whomever, all of them are not Bitcoin. They are not Bitcoin, okay? They are not Bitcoin, okay? However, they are far superior to the historical altcoins from a risk-reward standpoint. Again, sure, maybe your little cute gambling meme coin that you're going to be degenerate upon, right? Maybe it will go up against Bitcoin by a factor of 4, right? But what's more likely, that it does that again, or now that these leverage longs do that, right? Like you have to ask yourself these things, right? And so it's a feedback loop, right? It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And what we're going to see is the old way of the altcoins collapse and the new era of the altcoins begins. We're at the very beginning of the Wall Street altcoin market, right? We are pre-ICO era, pre-2017 era. It's like 2014 or 2015 when it comes to the altcoins, right? If you are a Bitcoin maxi, this is going to be maybe a hard video for you to watch, but I'd really encourage you to take these ideas to heart, right? If you're a maxi that wants none of these securities and you want Bitcoin only in self-custody, I salute you. Good for you. I think that's a great idea. If you don't have a desire to buy MicroStrategy or any of the other securities that Michael Saylor or other people in suits and ties are offering, good for you. Stick with Bitcoin, Bitcoin only. That is the message. Don't worry about buying a single freaking share of MicroStrategy until you hit your Bitcoin stacking goal. You double the Bitcoin stacking goal, then you hit that twice over, right? Don't worry about buying a single share of some security that's a second or third order derivative of Bitcoin until you've stacked a decent amount of Bitcoin in self-custody if you can afford full UTXOs, right? That's the maxi me talking, okay? But being a realist here, the reality is the majority of the wealth in the world is in securities. It's in securities, it's in debt, it's in bonds, it's in real estate, right? Bitcoin is a tiny little orange slice, and that slice is coming for everything else. And in Bitcoin's past, when you had old versions of altcoins, the only way for Bitcoin to gain new capital was from someone selling some other asset for Bitcoin, right? Sell the real estate, buy the Bitcoin, sell the bond, buy the Bitcoin, sell the gold, buy the Bitcoin, sell the art, buy the Bitcoin, sell the Tesla stock, the Apple stock, the S&P, whatever, and buy the Bitcoin, right? But in this new era, in this Michael Saylor era, on the Saylor altcoin era, this new era, what's going to happen is that Bitcoin is going to cannibalize these other kinds of asset classes from within, right? Instead, most people that haven't adopted Bitcoin yet aren't disagreeable enough, high conviction enough, gutsy enough to get into Bitcoin. What they're going to do is they're going to say, yeah, I'm not going to be selling my stocks to buy Bitcoin, but I'll be buying this security product that will have some sort of Bitcoin underlying behind it. And so I believe, as a maxi, as somebody that's a radical self-custody advocate, as you surely know from my hundreds of videos here on YouTube, right? I can't help but admit the truth. And the truth is, which is awesome, that these new securities, these Michael Saylor kinds of securities, these altcoins, so to speak, are built upon Bitcoin, and they are far superior to securities that are competing with Bitcoin. Okay, why? Because altcoins on competing blockchains, altcoins on competing ledgers only survive if they drain capital from Bitcoin, while securities atop of Bitcoin have the monetary premium flow back to Bitcoin, right? Let's talk about one of, for some reason, people's favorite currencies, XRP, otherwise known as XRPoop, right? One of the worst altcoins out there. They have spent literally millions of dollars campaigning against Bitcoin over the course of years. In fact, from 2015 to roughly 2021 or so, right, they were one of the main fudsters, fear, uncertainty, and doubt spreaders out there saying, oh, Bitcoin uses too much energy, it's inefficient, blah, 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 whatever, right? So the reality is that these altcoins of the old world, they only survived if they distracted people from contributing to Bitcoin's network and Bitcoin's ledger and Bitcoin's nodes and miners and hash, right? But in this new era with the Saylor Securities, he is a Trojan horse, right? This is why Saylor, in my opinion, is the most consequential Bitcoiner in the world. Yes, Michael Saylor is a Trojan horse of Bitcoin into Wall Street. But guess what? He's also a Trojan horse in the opposite direction. Saylor is a Trojan horse from Wall Street into Bitcoin. Okay, there is nobody on the planet right now that is subtly injecting and infusing Bitcoin into people's portfolios more than Michael Saylor, right? Especially if Microstrategy, now known as Strategy, does manage to get into S&P 500, right? If it gets into S&P 500, then tens of millions of Americans are going to technically have indirect Bitcoin exposure via a security, which is an altcoin, quote unquote, right? But at the same time, he is bringing the Wall Street premium into Bitcoin. He's creating these altcoins and bringing them into Bitcoin, right? And so with these other former altcoins, XRP, Litecoin, Dogecoin, whatever stupid coin, right? The millions of digital altcoins that exist now, right? They only survive if they distract capital against Bitcoin. This is the typical 4-year cycle we've seen in the past, right? First, you have Bitcoin price run up, then you see Ethereum run up, then you see the mid caps, then the small caps run up. Eventually, capital is rotating out on the risk curve down the market cap list, and eventually things get so degenerate and so crazy that the capital flows out of Bitcoin, enough capital flows out of Bitcoin going out in the risk curve that Bitcoin starts to roll over and tumble, and when it tumbles, of course, everything else collapses and everybody loses their money. That is the 4-year cycle we've seen so far in Bitcoin's history. However, we have less in common with the near future than the ancient past. I've said this so many times, and the same thing is true, especially with Bitcoin. What Michael Saylor is doing and being this Trojan horse, both for Wall Street and for Bitcoin, I believe is one of the strongest contending arguments as to why the 4-year cycle for Bitcoin may be ending, if not ended, at the very least, I think slowing down. I don't know if it's ended, I don't know if it's not ended, but I think it is definitely slowing down. Maybe we get one more altcoin cycle pump this cycle. You should be crossing your fingers and wishing good luck because you're competing against this man. Right? That's who you're competing against. The more successful Michael Saylor is, the more these securities he issues, the higher the probability your stupid little altcoins that you're lying and deceiving yourself that you're going to end up making more Bitcoin, you're going to lose money in them, right? And so the point is, the other altcoins are in a zero-sum game against Bitcoin, right? Every dollar that flows into alternate blockchain is a dollar that's not flowing into Bitcoin, right? But with these kinds of securities that Michael Saylor is offering, it brings capital back into Bitcoin. You know, maybe some portion of the original capital, right? If you're putting $1 into MicroStrategy, obviously not that whole dollar is going back into Bitcoin, right? But a large percentage of it is, right? If you put $1 billion worth of capital into Ethereum, none of that capital flows back to Bitcoin, right? But if some investor out there and some insurance company or pension fund puts $1 billion into MicroStrategy, now known as Strategy, right, into their balance sheet, maybe Michael Saylor, via his Trojan horse ability to shift monetary premium, maybe what he'll be able to do is now he can have half of that $1 billion go back into the Bitcoin treasury, right? It's not a zero-sum game. And maybe that extends the cycle, right? And maybe then we do have a cycle draw down again like we've had previously, right? So maybe this dynamic doesn't end cycles, but only extends it. But whatever the case, I think it is a strong case to admit that this is not good for the ETH holders, the Solana holders, the Dogecoin holders, the Litecoin holders, right? You are competing against Michael Saylor, right? Yeah, sure, maybe your little blockchain has some CEO, you know, Vitalik or whomever it is, going out there and talking and making ads or whatever, but you just can't help but admit, Michael Saylor is a great meme, right? Like literally people for free will make hundreds and hundreds of memes of pictures of him, right? The best meme wins, right? And the best altcoin with the best meme ability wins. And I'm sorry, but your tiny little $50 million or $50 billion market cap stupid illiquid meme coin is just not the same kind of meme ability and number go up pumpamentals as Michael Saylor talking to the highest net worth people in the world, right? Saylor is trying to sell his own altcoins in the same way that Vitalik Buterin is trying to sell Ethereum to get back Bitcoin premium for himself and his cronies, in the same way everybody else is doing it, in the same way that Donald Trump and Scott Bessent and Howard Lutnick are trying to do that with American debt, right? It's the same thing with Michael Saylor, right? And I'm not saying all these people are morally equivalent, right? I'm not saying to say, oh, we worship it or, you know, we hate it. I'm just telling you the truth of what's actually going to happen. This is what is going to happen, right? And your little altcoin with your little CEO out there saying, proof of stake is better than proof of work, blah, 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 blah. Still buy my coin, right? They're just not going to be able to compete with the kind of conviction, the kind of capital, and the kind of influence that this guy has, right? So my encouragement is sell your stupid altcoins before you lose another 50% of your Bitcoin opportunity cost. Is very expensive. And I know thousands of you watching this video do still have 5%, 10%, or for goodness sakes, 50% of your capital these altcoins. And I'm telling you, maybe they pump, maybe you go up a little bit, but it's going to get harder and harder and harder for the altcoins to keep up because they're coming after only a small segment of the market, the degenerate gamblers in retail, not the mega multi-billion-dollar corporations like Saylor is doing. Let's get on with it. Saylor is accelerating nation-state adoption. Yes. The Wall Street Trojan horse. Yes, like I said earlier. And he's absolutely going to starve the altcoin market, right? Michael Saylor is the new altcoin machine. There is nobody on the planet Earth who's going to produce more Bitcoin altcoins and Bitcoin altcoin market cap in the next 5 years than Michael Saylor, okay? It is entirely possible this cycle that Microstrategy, now known as Strategy, is going to be worth more than Ethereum, right? This is the new altcoin, okay? Saylor is the new altcoin issuer, right? And I'm not saying this and saying, oh, sell your, okay, full disclosure, I own MicroStrategy and I own some options plays when it comes to MicroStrategy, right? But that's why I don't own altcoins anymore, right? If I have the itch, the emotional itch, I got to scratch where I can tell myself that I'm going to outperform Bitcoin, you know, first of all, good luck. But if I'm going to do that, I'm going to stick with the thing that's actually going to outperform it. I'm not going to dilute myself into some narrative that's 4 years old, that's dead, right? And this narrative eventually is going to fall apart. I'll get to that more in a moment, how this is going to pump MicroStrategy price, and then it's probably going to collapse it, right? Not only does Saylor's company Strategy, not only is it going to crush Coinbase, the exchange, because MicroStrategy has 50 times the amount of Bitcoin on its balance sheet, it is also going to crush these exchanges because they are the new altcoin casino, okay? Coinbase's whole business model, Kraken's whole business model, these crypto casinos, these Robin Hoods of the world, their whole business model is based upon trading fees, right? Oh, let's get people gambling on the degens, right? Buy and sell, buy and sell, buy and sell again and again and again. Keep the capital rotating from Bitcoin to Ethereum to the meme coins to the altcoins, back to Bitcoin, back to Ethereum, right? Keep the capital moving on the exchanges. That's how you get your money. Because, you know, Mr. Brian Armstrong isn't thinking that far into the future. He's not buying Bitcoin for the long-term future. They have a short-term incentive structure because they raise all kind of venture capitalistic parasitic money trying to meet every single quarterly report. And so that's the problem. They're not focused on the 1,000-year strategy of buying Bitcoin and holding it forever. They're focused on the 1 quarter, 2 quarter year strategy of just cycling capital through their own crypto casinos. And this is a fundamental crisis coming for Coinbase and all the crypto casinos out there. You have less in common with the future in the past. These exchanges are not going to explode. They're not going to do well in the coming years, right? Most people, the uninformed people coming into Bitcoin and blockchain technology think, oh, well, Bitcoin is too risky, but I'll buy Coinbase because they have cash flows and therefore intrinsic value and they're going to blah, 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 right? It's like the people don't understand what they're saying. Coinbase is screwed because of what MicroStrategy is doing, right? Saylor is the new Brian Armstrong, okay? People haven't put 2 and 2 together, right? He's the guy not only creating the crypto casino where people can keep buying and selling forever, right? He's also the guy making all the altcoins on the market, right? He's issuing all the lower risk altcoins that are paying out 8 to 10% annual yield. He's issuing all the high risk altcoins like MSTU and MSTX that are 2x leverage long, MicroStrategy stock, and of course his main altcoin, which is the equity of MicroStrategy stock, right? My video cut out, but I'm now back. Yeah, so Michael Saylor is basically not only the new crypto VC and altcoin issuer, but he's also the guy in charge of the crypto casino, right? He's not only the guy creating all the tokens, all the altcoins, all the securities, he's gonna starve the exchanges of their ability to be predators and prey upon people that are gamblers and degens, right? I'll make something very clear, right? Again, I don't want to make this video seem like I'm anti-Michael Saylor, right? Yeah, sure, I've got my critiques here and there, right? But I highly respect the guy. I watch basically every single interview he's ever done, right? I don't know him very well, but we've invited each other to dinner. We've seen each other maybe half a dozen times in person, right? We've seen each other at conferences, right? Run into each other, whatever, right? The point I'm making here is that you got to understand this is who Michael Saylor is. This is very good for Bitcoin. This is very good for Michael Saylor. It's very bad for the altcoins, right? And ultimately, MicroStrategy will follow the course of an altcoin. Let me get back into that here, right? Bitcoin securities, like I said earlier, are in their pre-ICO era, right? Wall Street is not buying Michael's securities. They're not buying his yield tokens that are going to be diluted into oblivion. They're not buying his equity, right? This is a tiny company, right? Keep in mind, MicroStrategy is still only trading at a 2x premium against their underlying. I think it should be worth much, much more than that, right? Again, this is a statement of reality. This is not a statement of blind Saylor worship or of, condemning people, right? It's like, this is just what's going to happen, right? For Bitcoin to become a part of the larger global scale, we need some sort of way for Bitcoin to cannibalize the monetary premium of securities. What's the best way to do that? What's the realistic way it's going to do that? Is by having Bitcoin-backed securities, because the Bitcoin-backed securities are going to be better than the non-Bitcoin securities. And what we're going to see, and which is ultimately going to be MicroStrategy's downfall in terms of the price in Bitcoin, is going to be the monetary premium flows from non-Bitcoin securities into Bitcoin-backed securities, which Michael Saylor has a monopoly over, and then it's all going to flow back into Bitcoin, right? This is a means to the end, right? Yes, this is very good for Bitcoin. This will bring in all kinds of capital to Bitcoin that beforehand was not possible to bring into Bitcoin, because these are non-zero-sum game securities. These are altcoins that are not a zero-sum game in direct competition with Bitcoin. Yes, most people buying these securities are going to get wrecked. Most people buying MSTX, MSTU, options on MicroStrategy, the underlying stock MSTR, and everything else, whether it's Saylors or otherwise, including the ETFs, most people are going to get wrecked. You think magically, now that we're 0.5%, maybe 1% of the way through total global Bitcoin adoption, that magically we passed the chasm and we're never going to have any rug pulls ever again? We're never going to have any kind of fraud, any kind of lost Bitcoin ever? Like, for goodness sakes, what are you thinking? We had Bybit lose $1.4 billion worth of Bitcoin just a few weeks ago, right? North Korean hackers took it, right? If you think that the shenanigans are over now that Mt. Gox and FTX is in the past, you are deluding yourself, right? And most people are going to get wrecked. You can't have these kinds of stupid outsized returns without a lot of risk. They're lower risk than the previous forms of altcoins, but there's still a lot of risk involved, right? In my opinion, this is what will crush altcoin seasons. It's what's going to crush altcoin seasons. If I'm a Wall Street manager trying to move $500 million of Bitcoin, right? It's like, and I'm like, okay, I've been tasked with having some underlying Bitcoin exposure. And also, by the way, my boss said, hey, if you can outperform Bitcoin, go for it. Like, what do you think I'm going to actually buy? Am I going to buy Michael Saylor's securities or Vitalik Buterin's currencies and securities, right? It's like, am I going to buy XR Poop or am I going to buy Strike, right? Saylor's yield currencies, right? It's like, these are the better altcoins. Like, there's no second best monopoly in altcoins. It's Michael Saylor, right? And that's going to crush your altcoins even more than they've already been crushed. The majority of losses in your altcoins are in front of us, not behind us. You've less in common with the future in the past. And so you have two options. Either repent of your ways and come back to Bitcoin and run away from your altcoins, or you're going to lose more money in the next couple years than you've lost in the previous couple years, right? In my opinion, right? And yes, when Bitcoin falls 30%, 50%, whatever percent, these tokens are going to fall even more. There is far higher risk in these securities than the underlying Bitcoin asset, right? Everything not backed by Bitcoin trends towards 0 against Bitcoin, but the Bitcoin securities trend to 1, right? MicroStrategy, now known as Strategy, I think is going to have a really good year. In fact, I think it's going to have a very good decade. I think it's going to do really well. But keep in mind, eventually, we will run out of monetary premium in the traditional stock market and traditional assets. And when that monetary premium runs out, right? Because Michael Saylor's monetary premium and his fiat instruments is obviously objectively better than the fiat premiums in non-Bitcoin assets, right? But when there's no more juice left to squeeze from the lemon that is monetary premium and non-Bitcoin assets, that's where we start to have real trouble for Bitcoin, right? for MicroStrategy, right? Why would I be willing to pay a premium against MicroStrategy's Bitcoin when there's not a lot left of Michael Saylor to arbitrage, of Michael Saylor to bring in a BTC yield, right? Yeah, sure, Michael Saylor can have 40, 50, 60, 80% BTC yield right now when there's a heck of a lot of monetary premium out there, literally trillions of dollars, right? If Michael Saylor gets 1% of the bond market into his fixed income securities, that's $3 trillion. They're going to flow through the Trojan horse, says Michael Saylor's company, directly into Bitcoin. That's going to send Bitcoin to literally millions of dollars a coin. Yes, that's great. He'll make a lot of money. He'll have a massive BTC yield as he goes from issuing billions and tens of billions of dollars of offerings into literally 100 billion, if not trillion dollar offerings, right? That's going to be the future. But eventually that runs out. You can't have a BTC yield increase to 80% forever. Not even 20% you can have it going on very long, right? To have a high BTC yield inherently is the inherent trade-off that means it can't go on forever. And the better Michael Saylor outperforms the market, the better that Michael Saylor has his stock outperform Bitcoin, that means the faster and shorter the runway for him to be able to do this. That's why he's hyper accelerating. He doesn't care about what the little people on Twitter complain about at the money issuance. He knows that this lemon is not an infinite size, right? Eventually, all monetary premium is going back to Bitcoin, right? And so, yes, everything trends to zero against Bitcoin. Real estate, your gold, all your fiat premium assets are trending down forever towards ever closer to zero against Bitcoin, right? And your fiat stocks, your fiat premiums are trending to zero against Bitcoin forever. But MicroStrategy is trending to 1 against Bitcoin, right? Yeah, sure, it maybe at some point reaches a 4x MNAV or a 4x multiple against this Bitcoin, but eventually it will trend back to 1. It's not going to trend to 0 because why would it, right? But it's not going to keep going up forever. People that think that, oh, MicroStrategy is going to get a forever larger premium against Bitcoin are just deluding themselves, right? Why? Because there is not an infinite amount of fiat premium to extract from the fiat world. Eventually, MicroStrategy will trend back to 1. And so the higher that premium goes, because investors are pricing in a higher BTC yield for Michael Saylor, that inherently means the higher the downside for the stock and for all the securities he's offering, right? There was a massive, humongous, multi-trillion dollar bubble coming of Bitcoin-backed quote-unquote altcoins, securities, convertible notes, yield income products, highly option leverage products, whatever. Huge bubble coming of those, right? But most will not be ready for when everyone figures out the downside, when everyone figures out the collapse, right? You are so early to the Michael Saylor trade. Why? Because the altcoin casino is literally still worth over $1 trillion, and Michael Saylor's company isn't even worth $250 billion, right? His company's not even worth a couple hundred billion. And the total addressable market for Michael Saylor's altcoins and meme coins is literally 100 times larger than the total addressable market for the online retail degenerate gamblers, right? It's a larger market cap, and it's trading at not even a quarter of the same kind of size, right? Massive bubble coming. It is going to skyrocket these securities, right? But again, it will collapse. I really want to emphasize that. MicroStrategy stock, strategy, and all the derivatives with it are not Bitcoin. They will eventually trend down, not to 0, but to 1 against Bitcoin. They won't fall as much as the non-Bitcoin assets, but they'll trend to 1, right? I'm thrilled to see this happen. I'm thrilled to see Michael Saylor. I'm so grateful for Michael with accelerating this adoption, accelerating the Trojan horse. I think he's been pivotal in the United States adopting Bitcoin as a treasury strategy, but it doesn't matter if you like the guy, you dislike the guy. He knows this himself. You can't have the yield go on forever, right? You can only have it go on as long as possible, as long as there's fiat premium still left to extract, right? The market for this, for his altcoins, is easily $3 trillion, like I outlined a few moments ago, potentially up to 30 trillion, right? If we continue to grow the fiat premium of non-Bitcoin assets, right? It's just going to grow. The market cap grows at literally multiple trillions of dollars a year. And so, like, there's a long multi-decade runway for Michael Saylor to be able to do this, right? Like his infamous prediction of $13 million a coin in 2045, that's only with less than a 10% global allocation to Bitcoin. MicroStrategy will still be churning out all kinds of yield products, all kinds of securities that they're going to dilute into oblivion with new issuances. Why? Because their tokens are not Bitcoin. Their tokens are a Trojan horse for the rest of the world to adopt Bitcoin, right? Literally, it's going to be worth trillions of dollars. Michael Saylor is going to be a trillionaire, in my opinion, right? And likewise, he will continue to issue these new quote-unquote altcoins that he's creating, starve the old altcoins, send them into oblivion, right? Michael Saylor is working full-time to crush Ethereum and Solana and Binance and all the other stupid altcoins into oblivion, right? He's not doing it because he has a vendetta against them. He's doing it because it's in his economic interest. The faster he accelerates Bitcoin, the faster he accelerates his altcoins and his securities, the faster your stupid little altcoins that you're holding holding on to because you're hoping for a little 2x. The faster they get crushed, another 90%, another 90%, and another 90% in terms of Bitcoin. Number one, my suggestions. Number one, if you still have altcoins, and I know a lot of you do for some reason, number one, run from your old altcoins as fast as possible because Michael Saylor is going to crush them. Number two, don't be surprised when MicroStrategy outperforms Bitcoin. A lot of Bitcoin maxis that don't have the altcoins, good for you, are going to complain. Why is strategy outperforming Bitcoin? Why is Bitcoin only up 80% and strategy up 300%? It doesn't make sense because the MNAV should be trending to 1. They don't, a lot of people are going to complain, and that's fine, right? You can complain, but don't say that I didn't warn you, right? Like, it's going to outperform Bitcoin for a while, right? What is the most valuable business in the world? Right now, there is more value. The largest unaddressed market in the world is converting non-Bitcoin premium into Bitcoin premium, non-monetary singularity premium into monetary singularity premium, right? Eventually, that will dilute too, right? It will have its time and then that era will end. Maybe the business pivots into a new strategy, but we're so early we can't even begin to fathom that yet, right? So that's the second thing, is that don't get caught in the hype. Yes, probably all these equities and issuances and offerings that Saylor has, many of them, if not most of them, are probably going to outperform Bitcoin if they're designed to outperform Bitcoin. Obviously, a lot of the yield projects aren't designed to outperform Bitcoin, but a lot of them are going to outperform. Don't get caught up in the hype and don't be surprised by the hype. But number three, what I must emphasize here is that these things are not Bitcoin. Okay, your little MicroStrategy shares are not going to have an increasing premium against Bitcoin forever. They're not going to. They can't. They won't, right? And so pretty much everybody is wrong. And that's why I'm so sure this is exactly how it's going to play out, because everybody's wrong, right? All the little altcoin degens that are hoping and praying and crossing their fingers and, doing whatever are going to be wrong because Saylor's going to crush them, right? All the Bitcoin maxis that say MicroStrategy will never outperform Bitcoin sustainably over a multi-year period, blah, 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 whatever, they're all going to be wrong. And they're going to miss out on opportunity of that, right? And all the MicroStrategy bulls, they're saying MicroStrategy to the moon. I only need MicroStrategy shares. I never need self-custody Bitcoin. Woohoo! They're going to be totally wrong too. Everybody's going to get burnt. Everybody's going to get wrecked at different times and in different scales and for different reasons, but all of them are going to get wrecked. That's what you have to understand. This Trojan horse guy, this Michael Saylor guy, is more important than just another billionaire that's bought another $1 billion worth of Bitcoin, right? He's critical because he's accelerating the collapse of the old altcoin regime, creating a new altcoin regime, and eventually that new altcoin regime will eventually collapse because you can't have BTC yield forever, only as long as there's fiat premium remaining to be harvested. So if you are somebody that wants to have a conversation about this, if you want to talk about MicroStrategy cycles, MSTR cycles, and allocation planning for your personal Bitcoin portfolio, if you want to talk about income and retirement strategies for the different kinds of securities that Michael Saylor is offering. I'm actually about to have a call with somebody in a few minutes here. A lot of people are retiring or near retirement or trying to get an income on their Bitcoin, and Michael Saylor's altcoins is going to be the way you do that, right? You can get 5-8% yield on these altcoins. And so you probably need somebody to come alongside you and help you decide what allocations you should have to these different kinds of assets and securities per your specific financial goals, right? Also, you probably need a way to exit MSTR shares quickly if you're going to convert back into Bitcoin. I've seen it all the time. Banking systems give a lot of needless regulation and difficulty to people trying to move large amounts of capital either into or out of Bitcoin, especially into Bitcoin, right? The last thing you want when you have a highly volatile asset, commodity like Bitcoin, and a highly volatile security like all of Michael Saylor's securities, the last thing you want is for your bank to say, oh, we think there's a financial fraud. We're going to freeze your account for 60 days or for a week or for whatever, right? That's the last thing you want. And that's why it's so critical. You have an over-the-counter desk ready for you if you are ever planning on converting more than $50,000 worth of securities back into Bitcoin, right? If you are trying to trade your MSTR shares back into Bitcoin at some point this cycle, whether that's a month from now or a year from now, you need to have an OTC desk if you're going to be moving more than $50,000 worth of capital. Otherwise, you're dramatically increasing the risk that your financial institution or your traditional finance bank is going to freeze your assets. I've seen it all the time. And that's very painful to have $100,000 or $1 million sitting in some stupid account somewhere, waiting for some low-level intern in some other state that you can't even talk to on a support line, right? Meanwhile, you're seeing the things you're trying to buy or sell move up or down 5 or 10% in a single day, right? That's really expensive. That's why you need to over-the-counter the desk as soon as possible. If you want to have a conversation about deciding what percentage of my portfolio should I have in self-custody, what percentage should I have in these different kinds of paper diversifications, whether I'm trying to increase my risk and get some Bitcoin, like myself, I'm personally somebody higher in the risk curve. I'm trying to get more money on my Bitcoin, right? Or if you're somebody that's maybe older than me, lower risk, trying to get income off of it, right? Whoever you are, if you're trying to decide what kind of diversification you have, okay, I think that's a worthwhile conversation to have, right? And ultimately making the most of this rare opportunity, right? A lot of people are going to say the MicroStrategy hype is never gonna manifest. A lot of other people are going to say it's going to manifest forever. Both of them are wrong. You got to keep in mind, this is a massive opportunity. But the bigger the opportunity, the shorter the window to capitalize on it. And I think this opportunity is really freaking big, which implies the time to act is really freaking short. So if you want to have a conversation about these things, about MicroStrategy, the future of MicroStrategy, how you can leverage MicroStrategy either to increase your Bitcoin exposure and ultimately increase the number of Bitcoin you have, or lower your risk as you enter retirement and need more cash flow and you don't want to sacrifice your underlying Bitcoin collateral, let's have a conversation about how to help you end up with as much Bitcoin as possible via Saylor Securities and via all means possible, right? Text the phone number on the screen. You can find the information to reach me in the link in the description below. Just text MicroStrategy, strategy, whatever. Let me know that this is specifically what you're trying to learn about. Let's have a conversation. Send your name, send your email, and send your story and how I can help you. I'm happy to have a conversation, but the reality is that 50,000 people between YouTube and Twitter follow me. I can't help everyone, and so in this massive opportunity that we have a short period of time to capitalize on, I'm happy to help as many of you as possible while I still have time. So reach out today. The phone number is on the screen. You have no excuse. What more do you want from me? I'm doing everything I possibly can to increase this information because ultimately, who do I want to see control the world in the future? I want to see the Bitcoin maxis control the future. I don't want to see the Vitalik Buterins and Brian Armstrongs. I want to see the Michael Saylors control the future. And if you're watching this channel, if you're watching my videos, you are the kind of person I want to see end up with as much Bitcoin as possible. I don't want to see the suits or the nation states or the politicians end up with more Bitcoin. I want to see you end up with more Bitcoin. So if you also, like me, want to end up with more Bitcoin, give the phone number on the screen a text. And remember, yes, Saylor is issuing altcoins. Yes, they're going to be diluted. Yes, this is a good thing for Bitcoin. And maybe these securities aren't for you, but they're for somebody. At times, they're going to radically outperform Bitcoin. Other times, they're not. It's going to be a massive opportunity, I think, for years, if not decades. Those opportunities will shift over time. However, everything else, non-Bitcoin, trends to zero. And everything Saylor is issuing trends to 1 against Bitcoin. So that's the video. Thank you for your time. Please subscribe. If you've watched to the end of this video, you have no excuse not to subscribe because you clearly like the content. Give the phone number a text. Let's have a conversation while the opportunity is still there. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.